Welcome back to the Chattable podcast, where we learn real English in real life and have fun and be proud.
Always great to be here.
Yeah, it is. And today we have a truly fascinating episode for you.
We do.
We're exploring the intense, high-stakes language of corporate battles, legal disputes, and just fierce business competition.
The fun stuff.
Exactly. We'll be looking at 3 highly vivid, action-packed English idioms that top tech companies and business leaders embody every single day. And for you, the listener, whether you are navigating a workplace negotiation or just trying to understand complex business news, this episode is going to act as your essential shortcut to sounding like a native expert.
And it's so crucial to frame it exactly that way for you, because these aren't just, vocabulary words. They represent how business leaders handle extreme pressure.
Right.
When you understand these idioms, you're gaining insight into the psychology of how professionals behave when the stakes are incredibly high.
Okay, let's unpack this with our first phrase of the episode. The phrase is stand the ground.
Or you'll also hear it as stand your ground.
Right, stand your ground.
Yeah.
I was actually reading an analysis recently about the AI company Anthropic, and the author noted, quote, "Many tech companies and their employees are applauding Anthropic for standing their ground facing the Pentagon's threat to list it as a supply chain risk."
Yeah, and to really grasp the weight of a statement like that, we have to kind of peel back the layers. We have to look at the deep military roots of this phrase.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So I want you to mentally transport yourself to a battlefield centuries ago.
Sounds intense.
Very. Think of the absolute chaos, the deafening noise, and just the sheer, overwhelming terror of that environment.
Right. No technology, just people.
Exactly. And when an enemy army charged forward, every single human instinct naturally screams at those defending soldiers to just run away, to retreat to safety.
Fight or flight.
Right. But the commander would yell at the soldiers to stand their ground. And that wasn't a suggestion. It was a vital, non-negotiable order.
Meaning, do not move.
Exactly. It meant do not run away, do not retreat, and you must defend the exact physical spot of Earth you are standing on, regardless of how terrifying the opposition in front of you might be.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
When we talk about standing your ground in a modern context, isn't that sometimes just a polite way of saying someone is being, incredibly stubborn?
That's a really good question.
Like, at what point does standing your ground cross over from being principled to just being inflexible?
That is a brilliant distinction to make, and it gets to the very heart of how you should use this phrase. Stubbornness is an unthinking refusal to change your mind. It's often driven by ego.
Okay.
Standing your ground, however, is an active, calculated defense of a core principle or value. It requires a tremendous amount of cognitive load.
So it's intentional.
Very. When you are stubborn, you're just ignoring the opposition. When you stand your ground, you are fully aware of the threat, you understand exactly what it can do to you, and you consciously make the decision that your principles are more important than your immediate safety or comfort.
That makes perfect sense. It's like the difference between closing your eyes and bracing for impact versus keeping your eyes wide open and choosing not to move.
That's a great way to put it.
And that translates so perfectly into how you can apply this in your daily life. You use this phrase whenever someone faces heavy criticism, intense intimidation, or overwhelming pressure to change their mind, but they completely refuse to back down.
Precisely. In the business world, standing your ground usually involves sticking to your morals, your core values, or your company policies when a highly powerful client or entity demands that you change them.
Right.
Think about it in your own career for a moment. Think of a time you had to defend your personal boundaries at work.
We've all been there.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe a superior was aggressively pushing you to work through the weekend, or a massive client was demanding something entirely outside the scope of your contract.
Yeah.
When you plant your feet and say, no, I am sticking to my principles, you are embodying this idiom. You are standing your ground.
So let's look a little closer at that real-world scenario with Anthropic and its CEO, Dario Amodei.
Oh.
And just to be completely clear to you as we analyze this, we are strictly reporting the facts of this dispute as an example of the idiom.
Right, absolutely.
We aren't taking any sides regarding military AI or the specific organizations involved. We are simply looking at the mechanics of the pressure.
What's fascinating here is the sheer, undeniable scale of the pressure involved. We're talking about the U.S. military, the Pentagon.
The ultimate powerhouse.
Exactly. They essentially threatened Anthropic's business operations by threatening to list the company as a supply chain risk.
Which sounds bad, but how bad is it really?
We need to unpack what that actually means in the corporate sphere. Being labeled a supply chain risk by the Pentagon isn't just a bad review. It is a massive red flag to the entire global market.
Oh, wow.
It signals that your product might be a liability, potentially cutting you off from massive contracts and partnerships. It is the absolute modern-day equivalent of an enemy army charging directly at your front lines.
Exactly. It's an existential threat. Most companies, when faced with the power, influence, and unlimited resources of a government entity like the Pentagon, would immediately panic.
They fold.
Right, that primal instinct to retreat would kick in, and they would instantly compromise and do whatever the government asked in order to protect their immediate business interests and revenue streams.
But Amodei and his team evaluated that landscape and made a vastly different choice.
They really did.
According to the reporting, they refused to compromise their safety principles. They looked at the immense pressure bearing down on them, they evaluated their core values regarding AI safety, and they actively chose not to give in.
They held firm.
They did. By refusing to retreat from their principles, despite the Pentagon's overt threat, they were, quite literally, standing their ground.
And that explains the second half of that scenario.
Right.
Why so many other tech companies and employees were applauding them. In a corporate culture that often prioritizes profit over principle, it takes a tremendous amount of courage to stand your ground when the opponent is that large and formidable.
Absolutely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because our next phrase is very closely related to standing your ground, but it carries a distinct and crucial nuance.
Yes.
The phrase is hold one's line, or as you'll often hear it in conversation, holding the line.
It's classic.
It really is. To give you some context on how this appears in the wild, there's a situation a few years ago where Apple got itself into a bit of controversy in holding its line against the U.S. government, demanding it to unlock a person's phone after his death.
This is another brilliant idiom borrowed directly from military strategy, but the shift in imagery is what makes it so powerful.
How so?
Well, while standing your ground is often about defending your specific individual spot or your personal morals, holding the line refers to a collective defensive formation.
Like a group effort.
Exactly. Imagine a long line of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder with their shields locked. That line must not break under any circumstances.
Because if it does...
If one single person steps back, the structural integrity of the entire line is compromised and the defense collapses.
It's also heavily used in the context of labor movements and union strikes, right?
Yes, very often.
Like the concept of a picket line.
Exactly. When workers go on strike, they form a picket line outside the business. To hold the line in that scenario means you are maintaining a strict boundary and refusing to let absolutely anyone cross it.
Even if management is offering incentives to break the strike.
Right. It represents solidarity. So when you use this phrase, you are talking about maintaining a strict, unyielding boundary.
That concept of a strict boundary is so crucial for you to understand, especially when you are navigating the corporate world. You will hear holding the line constantly in legal disputes, policy enforcement, and especially price negotiations.
A highly practical way to apply this in your daily life is to think about a classic sales negotiation.
Okay, hear it.
Let's say you are selling a premium product and a massive buyer comes to you demanding a 20% discount.
A huge cut.
Massive.
Yeah.
As the seller, you look at your margins, you understand the value of your product, and you refuse to drop the price.
You stand firm.
In business terminology, you are holding the line on pricing. It means you have drawn a definitive boundary and you are completely refusing to yield or make a concession, no matter how much the buyer pushes or threatens to walk away.
Let's dive into this scenario with Apple and its CEO, Tim Cook. And again, maintaining complete impartiality here, we are just looking at the linguistic mechanics of how Apple behaved in this incredibly high-profile situation.
The stakes here were just astronomical.
They really were. The government demanded that Apple essentially create a digital backdoor to unlock an iPhone belonging to a person after his death.
And the pressure wasn't just political, it was a massive, highly public legal fight.
Yeah.
But Apple had to look beyond that single phone. They had to look at the broader systemic boundary they were protecting.
Because a backdoor isn't just for one phone.
Exactly. In the realm of digital encryption, a backdoor isn't just a key for one specific door. It is effectively a master key. Apple knew that if they created that backdoor, if they let the government cross that boundary just once, the mathematical reality is that the privacy of all iPhones globally would be fundamentally compromised.
That brings it right back to that image of the lock shields in the military line.
Right.
If the line breaks in one place, the entire defense fails. Apple recognized that the specific code required to unlock that one single phone was essentially a vulnerability that could eventually threaten every single device they had ever manufactured.
Yes.
So, despite facing immense political, public, and legal pressure from the U.S. government, Tim Cook refused to write that code.
Apple was holding its line on user privacy. They established a firm, non-negotiable boundary that user data must be protected, and they refused to let anyone, even the federal government, cross it.
They held the formation.
Exactly. It is a flawless illustration of how you can use this phrase to describe an entity stubbornly defending a core systemic policy against massive external forces. It wasn't just about standing their ground on one issue. It was about holding the line for the entire ecosystem.
I love how vivid and physical these phrases are.
They really paint a picture.
But let's shift our energy away from defense, boundaries, and holding still.
Yeah.
Let's talk about intense, high-speed, aggressive competition.
My favorite kind.
Right. Our third and final idiom for this episode is breathe down the neck. To set the stage for this one, let's look at the global electric vehicle market.
Okay.
Analysts are currently pointing out that Chinese car makers are becoming more and more competitive, and they are breathing down the neck of Tesla around the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this idiom moves us entirely away from the battlefield and drops us directly onto the racetrack.
A totally different vibe.
It originates from physical racing, like a foot race or a high-stakes horse race. I want you to truly visualize this sensory experience.
Okay, we're visualizing.
Imagine you are in a race. You are running as fast as your legs can possibly carry you. You are currently in first place, but the person in second place is so incredibly close behind you that you can literally feel the physical air from their heavy breathing hitting the back of your neck.
That creates such a fascinating psychological dynamic.
It's intense.
You aren't just focused on your own performance or the finish line anymore. Your entire mental state is hijacked by the proximity of the threat directly behind you.
Exactly.
You can't even turn your head to look back and see exactly where they are, because the sheer mechanics of turning your head might slow you down by a fraction of a second, causing you to lose. You just feel their presence right there on your skin.
It creates instant, undeniable anxiety. And that deeply physical sensation translates perfectly into two main uses for your daily life.
Tell us the first one.
The first use is in macro business competition, just like the Tesla scenario. It means a rival company is catching up to you at an alarming speed and is threatening to steal your first place spot in the market.
And the second use is something you might have, unfortunately, experienced on a micro level in the workplace.
Oh, yes, the micromanager.
Exactly. If you have a manager who is severely micromanaging you, if they are literally standing directly behind your desk, watching your computer screen over your shoulder while you try to type.
The worst feeling.
It is. You would complain to your coworkers, my boss is constantly breathing down my neck. It perfectly captures that highly uncomfortable, suffocating feeling of being closely watched and pressured.
Let's look closely at the business competition example involving Elon Musk and Tesla. For years, Tesla was essentially completely alone in first place for electric vehicles.
They really were.
They were so far ahead in the race, driven by their first mover advantage, that nobody else was even remotely close. They were running on an empty track.
They had the luxury of setting their own pace without feeling any immediate pressure from behind.
But the reality of the race has changed dramatically. Recently, formidable competitors have entered the track and accelerated at a staggering pace.
Specifically, companies like BYD out of China.
Right.
They have ramped up their global production incredibly fast.
And they aren't just scaling production rapidly, they are becoming fiercely competitive on every single front.
No.
They are matching Tesla's technological advancements, and crucially, they are beating them on price points.
So the gap is closing.
Fast. So while Tesla is still currently running in first place in many metrics, the psychological and economic dynamic has entirely shifted. If Elon Musk were to look back right now, BYD is right there.
The massive gap that used to exist has vanished, and the pressure is relentless.
They are quite literally breathing down the neck of his company. And as the analyst noted, this isn't isolated to one region. It's happening around the world.
So what does this all mean? Throughout this episode, we have explored three incredibly dynamic phrases that serve as your shortcut to navigating and articulating intense situations.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We did. We looked at the active, principled defense of your personal morals by standing your ground. We examined the collective strategy of maintaining a strict, unbreakable boundary by holding the line. And finally, we unpacked the uncomfortable, urgent sensory pressure of a rapidly approaching competitor breathing down your neck.
This raises an important question for you to mull over as we wrap up.
I love these. Let's hear it.
Notice how the language of everyday business, policy enforcement, and market negotiation is entirely borrowed from literal wars and high-stakes racing.
That is true.
It makes you wonder, does the very vocabulary we use in English subconsciously train us to view our daily workplace as a literal battlefield? Are we constantly being conditioned to be on the defensive, waiting for an attack, or running frantically from a competitor? It is a fascinating lens through which to view how language shapes our reality and our stress levels at work.
That is such a brilliant and provocative point to leave on. It really makes you think about the words you choose every day.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We highly encourage you to try using one of these phrases, standing your ground, holding the line, or describing a competitor breathing down your neck in your daily life, in a meeting, or when reading the news this week. Keep analyzing the language around you, keep practicing, and we will see you next time.